Towson, who got the news first? I got the news first. Hell, I was trying to take a little nap before Light City, and the Ravens trade Timmy Jernigan to the Philadelphia Eagles. Luke Jones is here to discuss all aspects of this, and I know we have a Liars Luncheon coming up in the draft in a couple of weeks, but Luke, this is, most of the time you can disagree with a trade or agree with a trade or rationalize a trade. I don't know that I really understand this one much more than they must have not have wanted Timmy Jernigan around anymore.
Well, I think, and I had this similar reaction to you. I think when you look at this and you see, okay, well, they're trading a starting player, a guy who definitely his play declined somewhat down the stretch last year, even though you could say that about probably a few members of that defense given the way they struggled. But you look at it and you say, okay, well, you're only exchanging third-round picks. You're moving up 25 spots in the third round. That doesn't seem like it's enough, right? A guy who's been a starter for the last 2 years.
Well, I always fill it in with a human being. It's going to be Timmy Jernigan and a fourth-rounder for a third-rounder. That's pretty much the way it's going to roll, right? It's going to be two human beings for one for a year because they were going to lose Jernigan next year anyway, right?
Well, it's their third-round compensatory pick that they were awarded earlier this offseason. But when you look at it and you see the difference between the 74th overall pick, which is what they're getting from Philadelphia, and the 99th overall pick, which is what the Ravens are sending to the Eagles, you see that the points on the famous, the Jimmy Johnson trade value chart, you look at that, the difference in those points equates to roughly a late third-round pick. So when you think about it in that context, it sounds a little bit better from a standpoint of Timmy Jernigan was going to be a free agent after this year. I think it was very obvious that with the Ravens making the steep financial commitment they did to Brandon Williams, they weren't going to be giving out another big contract along the defensive line. Not that Jernigan was going to get that big of a deal, but he's still a guy who was regarded as their best interior pass rusher, which now that's another question mark that they have in addition to their other, their plethora of questions and needs that they already had. So, this is an interesting deal from that standpoint. I think you certainly look at this, and, New England did this with Jamie Collins last year as far as getting your pick sooner than whatever a compensatory pick might be, whether even if he has a monster year, whether you're going to get a third or fourth round compensatory pick, that's still very much up in the air. So you look at it from that standpoint and say, okay, you get your value immediately. You're locked into getting something useful in terms of being able to move up 25 spots in a really deep draft. But on the flip side, you are giving up a year of Timmy Jernigan's play. And, that's something that has value to it. So, it's interesting because I've seen a lot of people kind of spin this in terms of what this does for the Ravens right now. Some people have said, well, they're clearly the coaching staff is feeling pressure to win this year. But on the flip side, I kind of look at a deal like this and say, this seems more like it's set up for the future than 2017. So, it's interesting to kind of interpret this one way or the other, but I will say I've warmed up to it a lot more than what my initial reaction was, which what you mentioned, a simple swapping of third-round picks doesn't really seem like it's enough value. But, like I said, when you look at that difference, it does come out to the number of points, so to speak, when you look at that chart of being a late third-round pick. But, as you pointed out, you're trading a known for an unknown.
Well, you wouldn't get that pick back if Jernigan, has a big year, signs a big deal. You get your compensatory for. You don't wind up getting it for 2 more years. So you're getting the player for 2 full seasons ahead of when you would have, right? And if you love this draft and you love the top 80 players in the draft, and then now have 4 picks, I'll hear all that, but then you got to go play without Timmy Jernigan this year, which. I wasn't a guy who was in love with Timmy Jernigan, but I thought he was a nice player. I don't look at him as one of the busts. I look at him as a guy you want on your team. I don't know why they didn't want him for the next 20 games. That's a little strange to me. That's all.
Yeah, and I think that's fair to say. I believe me, and I even posted this. So when I posted my blog on my Facebook page, I even said, there was some intrigue to me of seeing what a motivated Timmy Jernigan would do in a contract year. It was very clear at the end of last year that wasn't playing at the highest level, was losing some snaps to Michael Pierce. But I think two things, and you alluded to this a little bit. One, this is regarded as a very deep draft, and this gives the Ravens another pick in the top 80, 74th overall selection. And two, this tells me that they have a lot of confidence in their defensive line depth. Talking about guys like Carl Davis and Bronson Kafusi and Willie Henry, guys who didn't play last year. So there is unknown there, but it makes me think that the Ravens are confident that they're going to be able to get good production from those individuals, in addition to whoever else they might bring in via the draft. And you would think now losing Jernigan and Lawrence Guy, of course Guy leaving for New England via free agency, that you're going to have to bring in someone else. So, this is going to be interesting. I think it's easy to say, well, they weren't going to re-sign Timmy Jernigan, but you still would have had him in 2017. So it really comes down to this draft being as heralded, as acclaimed as it is by so many pundits. It needs to deliver from that standpoint, and more specifically, the Ravens need to come away with a good football player here. If you, with that 74th overall pick, if you get a guy closer to a Brandon Williams in caliber than other third-round picks in recent years like Terrence Brooks or Bernard Pierce, then it looks a lot better. But if you end up giving up Timmy Jernigan and that 74th overall pick is a guy who ends up not doing very much, then it looks like a deal where you kind of gave away a guy who was entering his fourth year and had at least proven to be a productive starting player in the NFL. So this is it's up for debate. There's no doubt about that. But strictly from a value standpoint, like I said, when you do look at that trade value chart, it looks better than it does at first blush, which I had the same reaction as everyone else in that regard.
He is Luke Jones. We are talking all things Ravens. What does this mean for the interior line? I mean, I guess Pierce will step up into that role, and they obviously are stockpiling draft picks. The move almost smacks a little bit of a New England Patriots, right? Like getting rid of a Jamie Collins, getting rid of a Chandler Jones. I mean, getting rid of a player that everyone in the fan base can look at and say, well, that guy can still play. That guy's a quality player. That guy's not one of your busts. He's one of your guys you get on the field. He's a rotational player, right?
Yeah, and when you look at it in the context of what they've gotten in the second round, I mean, think about their second-round picks since Super Bowl 47. Arthur Brown, who's gone. Timmy Jernigan had developed into a 2-year starter and even played well as a rookie. Remember filling in for Haloti Ngata when he was suspended late in the 2014 season. Max Williams, still very much an unknown and a disappointment to this point because he hasn't been able to stay on the field. And then Correa last year, who was a non-factor as a rookie. So, Jernigan was really the only second-round pick that they've had since the Super Bowl that you felt good about. There's still a couple maybes at this point. A couple guys that the jury's still out as far as whether they're going to be positive contributors. But I think it does say a lot about Michael Pierce, who I think you'll see play a lot at the 3 technique spot. I think they still do have a lot of confidence in Carl Davis and Willie Henry because these are guys that they drafted relatively high over the last couple of years. So they're going to need to step up. If not, then this trade looks a lot worse than it does right now. So it's really going to depend on young guys. And like I said, I would be very surprised if we don't see them bring in draft another defensive lineman sometime, maybe not day 1, maybe not day 2, but early in day 3, you would think, to add into that mix. But it's definitely it's going to be interesting because as much as we've talked about, at least from a perception standpoint, the pressure being on John Harbaugh. This football team's has undergone a lot of change, and there are still a lot of holes to fill. And frankly, I'm not sure there are enough draft picks to address all of those holes without at least depending on a few young guys that are already on the roster.
I read around, and when I start to see these trades over the next 3 weeks, and we'll learn more at the Liars Luncheon, but the feeling is this draft is stacked defensively, right? Like that's the word on this thing.
Yeah, I mean, edge rusher, corner are 2 positions that specifically look like they're loaded. I mean, we've seen the reports. I mean, the Ravens, and other teams hosting a lot of these players too. I mean, I really don't read a whole lot into that. I mean, it's something that your ears perk up when you see they're hosting a name that you've been following in the draft. But lots of teams are visiting with these different guys. But, edge rusher certainly has been a position that's been talked about a lot as being very deep. And the Ravens certainly, figure to be in for some of those guys. Corner, we've talked about that a lot. Even though the Ravens added Brandon Carr, still very much in play to take a cornerback, even in the first round, if not the first round, certainly the first 2 or 3 rounds. But, you get the sense that those two positions specifically are quite deep, and those are two positions the Ravens could certainly stand to add talent. So, whether it's, Derek Barnett from Tennessee or, any number of the corners that have been talked about, you kind of see some of their standing fluctuate. Some guys are, more highly regarded than others, depending on who you talk to. But, those are positions, though, that are deep, and those are positions that you would assume, and again, you never draft specifically for need, but you draft best player available that fits a need that you have, and certainly those two positions kind of stand out on the defensive side. And, of course, there's plenty of discussion as far as some of these wide receivers, whether a Mike Williams, whether a Corey Davis, John Ross, the speedster from Washington who had the ridiculous 40 time. Those are guys.
Yeah, he's been mocked to the Ravens by a couple people too.
He would. That would be interesting because he's more of that speed guy. I think he's more highly regarded than Brashad Perriman was at this point as far as where he's potentially projected to go, but doesn't seem like he'd be exactly what they're looking for. I've talked a lot about Corey Davis from Western Michigan. I think he'd be a really intriguing pick for them if they are going to go wide receiver. And certainly Mike Williams from Clemson has the size, has the catch radius, has that ability to make contested catches. So, whether it's one of those guys or whether it becomes, where they do go defense in the first round, which, it's very clear their focus has been defense this offseason, for better or worse. I wasn't near, as much as I saw the same defense everyone did at the end of last season, I also had a longer memory to realize that defense wasn't terrible last year. That's been the focus, and meanwhile the offense has kind of just been waiting to do something other than lose the players that they've already lost. So it'll be interesting, but yeah, you look at the middle of that first round, edge rusher, corner, wide receiver. Those are 3 positions that really stand out for me, even though they just as easily could go offensive line as well, whether it's a Ryan Ramczyk or someone along those lines to address, the wide open right now at right tackle and center.
Well, they have picks, right? The one thing you'd say, they don't have Timmy Jernigan anymore, but they have a pick for that, and it's a pick in a position where they clearly want to pick, right? They start to stack their board, and they've said, if we can get that player, we like that player more than we want Timmy Jernigan rental for the next year, right?
Yeah, and the one thing I will say, and this is where I need to give them a compliment, because as you know, we've talked about this as far as their drafts over the last 4 or 5 years, and I've been someone who at times has thought they've been a little too concerned with quantity, meaning just stockpiling number of picks compared to where those picks fall. And this was a case where they probably could have gotten Philadelphia to give them an additional pick, where they could have traded Timmy Jernigan and say gotten a 5th round pick. But they decided they'd rather move up with their 3rd round pick 25 spots, which, I think there's some merit to that. After you get over the initial kind of shock of saying, well, they didn't really get an additional pick. They just improved the 3rd round pick they already had. So from that standpoint, getting another pick up into the top 75, that's something where, I do commend them if they truly feel like everyone else feels that this draft is that deep. Ultimately, we could talk all we want about the quality of a draft. Time will tell whether that's true or not. There was a time when Ravens fans and the Ravens were completely stoked about getting Matt Elam and Arthur Brown, and we see how that worked out. So you never really know, but you can only go off of the information you have right now, and all accounts say that this is a deep draft, and more specifically deep at some positions where the Ravens are clearly lacking. So in a case of you give up a 1-year rental of Jernigan, which is worth some value, I'll remind everyone, but you are moving up substantially with that 3rd round pick, and if you can get someone with the 74th overall pick that you have say a high second-round grade for, then great. So ultimately, time will tell whether this works out. And if Timmy Jernigan goes to the Eagles and has a career-high 12 sacks, then this one won't look as good necessarily.
He is Luke Jones. You can follow his journey out of Baltimore, Luke, as well as Luke at WNST.net. He'll be at Oriole Park at Camden Yards for the remainder of the season, quite frankly. We're going to give him a cot down there and just chase the Orioles around here. But it is nice to have baseball season as sort of a backdrop for all this, right? I mean, I'm watching hockey. I'm watching basketball. I don't know how Leonsis does it, by the way. On Tuesday night, I tried to watch both. When you try to watch both, you wind up watching neither, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's why. I've never been an NFL red zone guy necessarily because I just feel like my head's on a swivel trying to watch more than one thing, and I feel like I'm not retaining anything out of any of the games I'm watching. So, but you said it.
There's going to be a lot of that going on though with baseball and hockey and basketball. I mean, a lot of simultaneous is going to be happening here the next couple of weeks, and the longer they play, the longer the simultaneous is going to be going on. I will say this about baseball. Baseball moves slow enough that you got a chance, but not hockey, not basketball. I don't think.
Yeah, I'd agree with you on that. And, same thing with football. I mean, red zone, they say it's football for those who lack attention span. So, but baseball, that's a little more conducive to be able to flip a little bit here and there. But
I'm not one of them millennials. Exactly.
Right. But you know me, I'll be out the ballpark, so won't be any multitasking for me in that regard. Just be watching the Orioles try to build on their opening day win. How's that?
All right, ice up, son. We got Liars Luncheons and baseball games and Light City and things to do around here. You can find me, Nasty, at WNST.net anytime. Our London trip is on sale. We're awaiting the NFL schedule. There will be Green Bay. There will be Minnesota. There will be Nashville. There will be wherever the Raiders are playing. We're out in the Bayou Toyota Audio Vault all week long. We had a hell of a week here. If you've missed any of the great stuff we've done, go to the Bayou Toyota Audio Vault. It's there for you 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world. Just download the TuneIn Radio app. Don't forget our morning newspaper ships to your email inbox at 7 a.m. That's all brought to you by our friends at Planet Fitness and planetfitness.com. Last but never least, breaking news like the aforementioned Timmy Jernigan deal. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis Colatzos will be here on Thursday driving you home from 3 until 5. I am Nestor. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.